Hi, and welcome back to Let's Talk Forex with Alison and Chris. We've got a special episode for you this week. We're talking to Caroline Rundell, who runs a Forex trading coaching program called Trading Angel. We had her on a few months ago. That time we talked to her really about her trading journey and how she went from a beginner to an experienced trader to a professional trader. This time we're going to talk to her more about her coaching and what she looks for in beginner traders and experienced traders and how she helps them improve. Really hope you enjoy it. On a side note, you may have noticed if you're visiting our site, fxscouts.com, that we've had an upgrade. So please check it out. That's going to be for our users in the UK and in Europe and in Southeast Asia. If you're in Australia and South Africa, you're going to still have to wait for a bit, I'm afraid. But please have a look around and let us know what you think. You can get in touch with us, as always, at podcast@fxscouts.com. Thanks so much and enjoy this week's episode. Hey, Alison.
Hey, Chris. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm much better than I was last week. I tell you, I've recovered from my journeys across Europe, my unintentional journeys across Europe. Yeah, got some rest. I'm fantastic. Though the weather is changing in Portugal. We've come to the end of summer, so I'm a bit disappointed about that. We're supposed to get some rain today. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm actually doing really well. I must say the weather in the last couple of days here has just been very hot. So we're back at like 25, 26, which is wonderful. Quite surprising considering all the snow that they've had all over the place. I don't know if you saw, but Van Riemen's Park, the N3 highway.
Never down in Kenton, though.
No.
Yeah.
No, of course not. But the N3 highway, I think, was, I don't know how many kilometers it was backed up, but they only just cleared it after, since the weekend, it's been totally covered in snow. So they just cleared it, I think, today or a couple of days ago. So I think it was 5 days.
Yeah, it's not something that I guess the South African emergency services are used to dealing with, isn't it? Large amounts of snow like that. Were people stranded on the highway?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people were stranded. Oh, terrible. And they had to leave their cars. And I don't even know actually how they coped with it. But I think it must have been very scary for most people, really. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it has. But let's get on to the show today. We have a very special one. We've got Caroline Rundell again from Trading Angel, who was on a few months ago, but we've invited her back. So welcome to you, Caroline. Thank you so much for going back on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun last time, so I'm really happy to be back.
We're delighted. And there's a lot of new stuff we want to talk to you about.
Yes, lots of changes in the last few months.
Yeah, so as you may remember, our listeners and viewers, she's a professional trader and a trading coach. And her own journey from beginner to professional trader has been a very inspiring one. And it's something we actually spoke about in a previous episode. I'll actually put the link to that episode in the notes below. And I'll also put the links to your website, Caroline, because I think you outline that process as well. But today we want to focus more on your role as a mentor and a trading coach. And I think it's something that our viewers and listeners will find very interesting. So on that note, I wanted to ask you what inspired you to become a trading coach. And, I'm sure your approach has evolved over the years as you've evolved as a trader and as a coach. So can you walk us a little bit through, your journey as a trading coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely evolved over the years. So I set up Trading Angel in 2019, which was quite lucky timing because it was just before the pandemic hit. So I'd already had the wheels in motion before that happened, which was very, very lucky for me. I'd been trading for a few years up to that point, and I decided that I wanted to help other people because I'd had a really chaotic start. You might have remembered my journey from the last episode. But yeah, I mean, I self-taught. There was a lot of ups and downs. It was very difficult. And I wanted to help other people, save them as much time as possible in their journeys. Obviously, it's evolved quite a lot in that time because you learn on the job a lot of the time as well. And my trading has changed a lot in that time as well as that. But what I realized, which is actually kind of cool, is that, and I didn't think about this at the time when I set up Trading Angel, I didn't actually, connect the dots on this one. But my dad is a coach, and I grew up my whole life being coached by my dad.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it's in my DNA. I mean, you know how everyone's got their superpower, like their thing that they're just naturally good at. And I just feel like my whole life, I grew up with my dad coaching me, talking about mindset, talking about motivation, talking about self-improvement, talking about this over dinner, handing over books on the subject. It was almost a joke in our household because everyone was always getting coached. So yeah, it seems actually, I didn't really overthink it at the time when I set up Trading Angel. I just thought, I'm a trader, I want to help other traders. But then I realized a little bit later down the line, I was like, you know what? I feel like I was made to do this. This all makes sense.
It's amazing that you didn't realize that that your father was a coach and that you just went into it. Did you find it a natural thing as a result? I mean, did you slip into it so easily?
Do you know what? I did set out quite a few different things, and they, I was trying a lot of different things, especially when the pandemic hit. I was actually working as a journalist, a freelance journalist at the time, and I was told I couldn't go into work, which, wasn't easy. I remember being told, we'll give you the money for the shifts that you have booked in, but you can't come in. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Please, I'll come in. Don't pay me. I don't know what I'm going to do with my time if I'm not working. So I was really, I threw around a few ideas because I needed to keep myself entertained somehow. Those lockdowns were brutal, but coaching was the one that it all clicked into place. And that was the one that immediately I enjoyed, and it felt very rewarding. I just really enjoyed interacting with other traders. I found this is quite a few things with coaching. How to get the best out of people and how to motivate them. Things like using metaphors. People relate to metaphors very well, and things that they understand. Using things that they understand to help them explain something that they don't necessarily understand. And yeah, all of that, just I suppose with all the coaching that I grew up with my dad, it all fitted into place quite nicely. And I really enjoyed it. So I ran with it.
Yes. I mean, you said I was going to say, like, it's almost lucky, but I guess it's not lucky if it came from your father like that. Sounds like you were born to do this.
Yeah, I suppose it's lucky that I thought of it because I hadn't really, as I say, I hadn't really connected the dots. And when I decided to start coaching other traders, it was more just, it was just an idea, really. And I had a lot of ideas that didn't work out. And that was just one that did. So yeah, I guess it is lucky in some ways that I thought of it, and lucky that I had that upbringing, lucky that I, had that with my dad. And I guess lucky that I'm good at it.
I was going to say it. It sounds like, yes, as you say, it's your talent. And you mentioned that your coaching has evolved, your training style has evolved. Do you find the two dovetail, that the two have evolved in tandem with each other?
Yeah, I suppose. Do you know what? Interestingly, I see them as kind of separate, but also kind of the same, because coaching is very different to trading. And I think that it's possible to be a good coach or a bad coach and be the completely opposite kind of trader. So I think, they are very different. They are very different skills. So I am the sort of person I do like to constantly grow. I'm always looking for ways of growing and getting better at things. If I feel like I've done a bad job, it really upsets me. And I like to do a good job at things. So I am always looking for ways to grow in both of them. I mean, I guess naturally over time, you would expect both of them to have improved. It'd be kind of tragic if 5 years later I wasn't any better at either. But yeah, I do see them as completely different things. I do work on them separately. Obviously, with the coaching side of it, it's very trading specific. So a lot of it is obviously to do with mindset, and a lot of it's to do, with motivating and picking specific things to help for people to focus on, to develop, to practice and to get better at. And obviously you can't be a trading coach without having been a trader yourself, because you wouldn't know those specific things to do. But yeah, I do yeah, I suppose they have grown alongside each other, but I do see them somewhat as different things. There is an overlap, obviously.
And yeah, you mentioned there that you tailor your coaching methods, that it's about mindset and stuff like that. I mean, do you find that there's different methods to suit traders at different stages of their own trading careers, like beginners and advanced?
Yeah.
Or are you always just looking for something that someone is not particularly good at that you think they can improve?
Definitely it's different for a complete beginner to someone who's advanced. If I'm being completely honest, I mean, I'll work with anyone who really wants my help. So if someone, I will work with complete beginners, I will work with advanced traders. There is very, very distinctly a sweet spot. And that is the traders who come to me having traded for years and are almost experts. They have so much knowledge and they just can't seem to move forward. They've kind of got themselves stuck and they really, really, really want to be good. They really, really want to improve, but they don't know how. They just feel, they're by themselves doing this thing. They feel a bit lonely. And I really enjoy working with that kind of trader because there's so many things with that. First of all, a lot of the hard work's done for me. They know all about technical analysis. They understand the markets. They know they've done it all. They understand it's risky. They understand about that they've made all of these losses. They don't need to be told all of this. They don't need to learn any of that. What's also quite nice about it is they know it's difficult. By the time they come to me, they're often very deflated and saying, this is the last thing I'm going to try before I give up.
So it's real desperation in a lot of cases when they come to you.
Yeah, but also a little bit of hope there,
Yeah.
Like I'm not ready to give up. Yeah, I love this thing. And also what's quite sweet about it is often it's not about the money at that stage when they come to me, because I never actually talk about money earnings, because I understand that for a lot of traders, it's a lot more than quick profits. For a lot of people, it's this really difficult challenge that they really just want to be good at. They really want to master this skill. And obviously money comes into it in some senses in that it provides them with this feeling of hope. If they feel like if they master this skill, there's this feeling of hope that perhaps it will develop. Obviously it comes into it somehow. But yeah, it's very nice. People are often at that stage. They know it's not quick. They know it's not easy, but they're really willing to put in the work. And it's quite a nice place to work with people at. Obviously, when someone comes as a complete beginner, it's a very different story because they perhaps think it's going to be a little bit quicker and easier than it is. And I do have to let them know that this might be the most difficult thing you ever embark on.
Right.
And also they need to understand, they need to learn a whole new skill. So it's not necessarily about mindset so much at the beginning. At the beginning, it's about, this is technical analysis. This is fundamental analysis. This is how the markets move. This is what the candlesticks look like. It's a lot of the basics and setting up a routine for it and all of that. So yeah, it is very different depending on what stage they're at.
So on that note, if you had to look at the beginner and the advanced trader, what are the sort of key principles that you emphasize when you're helping traders build their own strategies?
So if a trader's complete beginner, I will show them my strategy. And that's because they don't know how to, they haven't already been trading one. They don't really know what's going on. And obviously that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So I need to be very clear if I'm working with a beginner. I need to find out, I always ask them what their routine is like. So are they working? How much free time do they have? When are they actually able to trade? Because not everyone is going to be able to trade my strategy. My strategy is in the New York session, so it's in the afternoons. Obviously, that works for me in my routine. But if someone is at work from 9 to 5, unless they can take a lunch break over that time, it's almost impossible. So for a lot of traders, they actually couldn't trade my style. But if a trader has already come to me and they've been trading for a long time, then I will obviously find out what is it that you've been doing, and we'll have a look at what their strategy is and if there's a component to it which needs to be adjusted. So very often when people come to me as an advanced trader, they're experts in technical analysis. I mean, they couldn't be any better at technical analysis at that point. And they absolute masters in it. They don't need to be told anything about technical analysis, but their strategy is often a lot of technical confluences. And this was actually where I was at a stage, a few years back. So I understand it very well. Just going in really, really deep technical analysis and forgetting about the full picture. And the way that I explain it to someone, I usually ask, but I use the analogy of football quite often because it's quite a nice one. And people in England often understand football analogy. But I will often say, for example, if a footballer is, let's say a footballer can run with the ball really, 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 really well. But that's all they can do. They can't pass, they can't defend, they can't take penalties, and they're not a team player. But they can run with the ball really, really, really well. That's like being excellent at technical analysis. That's the basics. You have to be able to do it. You have to. You're never going to be Ronaldo unless you can run really well with the ball. But you also need to be able to pass. You need to be able to spot opportunities. You do need to be able to take penalties. You need to be able to score goals. And without any of that other stuff, just running with the ball alone means nothing. And it's kind of like that with technical analysis, which is why trading is so difficult, because there are so many different things which you need to be masters in. And a lot of people do stop at technical analysis and not realize when it's time to move on and start learning a new skill. So yes, to answer your question, that was a long-winded way of going about it, but I will usually ask them what they're doing, what their setup is, what the components of their strategy are. And often it's a matter of adding in something, maybe taking out a technical indicator and looking at something else. A lot of people also struggle with the routine element of it.
So the discipline.
Yeah, really struggle with sort of seeing it as a job and seeing it as their profession, because before you are a professional trader, before you're making money as a professional trader, whilst you're still losing money, you almost have to act as though it's your job in order to move forward. It's a chicken and egg kind of thing. Obviously, not everyone who treats it as their job will go on to make money. As you said at the very beginning, most traders do lose money, and it's not for everyone. But if you are going to have a chance at being one of those 20% or whatever who can get through to the next stage, you do have to treat it as your job. And sometimes it's setting boundaries with the people in your life is quite a big thing. It's quite a big hurdle for a lot of people, because a lot of them don't necessarily want to admit that they're trading.
Right. Gosh, that is interesting. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, I get this a lot. Because they want to make money from it before they admit to their partner that this is what they're doing. So for a lot of people, and their friends don't understand, their family don't understand, the people who hear about it belittle it because it takes so long to be good at.
No, I was going to say, but also if they're trading at work or during their lunch hour, then it must be particularly difficult to go from the full-time job to the full-time trading and having to set those boundaries. I'm sure that must be,
Yeah, absolutely. And as you probably know, as a trader yourself, you sit around all day sometimes waiting for a setup. You blink and you miss it,
and it's gone.
Yeah, you suddenly get hungry. You go make some lunch, and you've missed the setup you've been waiting for, and that's it. That's the only setup there was all day. And sometimes just being really strict with the people around you and saying, from this time to this time, I am working. I cannot have you knocking on the door. I cannot be answering questions about what's for dinner. I can't be entertaining or doing other jobs. This is what I'm doing. And that part is actually very challenging for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think particularly if you have children as well. Yeah. I see Emily from Mindfully Trading, and she often talks about how she tries to manage the family dynamic and work it into her trading.
Yeah.
So do you find you can help people then? You alluded to that you help them find strategies and work around for their different, family situations.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things we do is we decide what their working hours are going to be. and what's workable within their own routine. So for absolutely every single person, it's going to be completely different. But first, just understanding what their commitments are already, what is non-negotiable. Like obviously they have to pick the kids up from school. Trading doesn't come first. And obviously if they're in a paid job, which I would always suggest someone is, what you have to prioritize the job that's paying you. You have to try and learn how to trade in and around it if that's what you want to do. But you do have to prioritize the job that's paying your bills. So it's just a matter of finding out what's already in their life and what's workable, and then setting out the hours for, what's a realistic amount of hours. Another thing as well, in terms of the hours working, a lot of traders, they actually try and do too many sometimes. And I liken it to going to the gym. It would be, trying to trade for 8 hours is like trying to go to the gym for 8 hours. You're just going to be an absolute mess at the end of it.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Yeah.
There are people that spend 8 hours in the gym, but they're hardcore. They didn't start doing that on day one. You work up to that. What's really common as well, one thing I see a lot with the traders is that they make a big win at the start of the session, and then they carry on trading and they trade it all away. So if they'd have just stopped after that first win and gone and done something else, they would have been up.
Would have been a good day.
Yeah. So a lot of it is just also, establishing those sorts of things. Where are you losing money? Why are you trying to trade too much? And there's a lot to it.
Just on that note, I mean, you're talking about sort of people over trading because they get so excited about their first win. What sort of techniques do you teach for risk management? Setting stops or take profits, and I mean, is that part of your? Is it part of something you teach everybody? Or
absolutely. Okay. I mean, a stop loss is non-negotiable. That's lesson one. Stop loss is non-negotiable, and a lot of people don't like stop losses.
It's so weird. It's like risk management 101.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what a lot of people struggle with, their ego perhaps gets in the way, and they don't want to lose a trade. They want to be right, and a lot of traders also really want to have a natural ability, or want to feel like they have a natural ability. So I knew it was going to go up, so I'm not going to have a stop loss because I knew it was going to go up eventually. I'll just hold it until it goes up. So that can kick in for a lot of people, and you must leave your ego at the door. And a lot of the time as well, when we look over at people's profit and losses, which is something that I do as a coach as well, we look at the facts, at the numbers, because often what people think they're losing money on is actually completely different to the actual facts, and we have to work with the facts. Having too big a stop loss is a killer. I mean, often people don't need as big a stop loss as they have. Sometimes they need a bigger one, but sometimes they don't, and it's just establishing the right stop loss. Yeah, so risk management is day one. Some traders will claim that you can have a bad strategy, and as long as your risk management's good, you can still make money. Most of trading is try not to lose your money. So yeah, risk management is a huge, huge part of it.
Yeah. And what role do you find that emotional discipline? And I know we've touched on it a few times. Do you find that, I mean, especially vis-a-vis what we were talking about earlier, like these advanced traders coming in, do you find that often their issue is emotional discipline? And how do you help, I mean, as a coach, how do you help manage, help traders manage their emotions like fear or greed while they're trading?
Yeah. Emotions are a huge part of what I work with for beginners and for advanced, for everyone along the road. It's a huge part of it. So, I mean, there's quite an interesting thing where you have to come to trading. I think there's a good car analogy here. Like each day as a trader is like approaching your car every day that you're going to go driving. You can't turn up one day and be like, do you know what? I've been driving forever. So what that the front tire is completely flat and the lights don't work and I haven't slept and I'm still drunk from last night. You don't just drive anywhere,
No,
do
no,
you?
of course not.
You have to come to each day driving, understanding that if you get in the car, it doesn't matter how long you've been driving for, you get in the car and the conditions aren't right. You can't run a red light just because you've been driving for a long time. You can't speed just because you've been driving for a long time. And it's the same thing with trading. You have to come to each day with that same discipline. You can't let it slip. You can't say, oh, I've been trading for 10 years. So, well, whatever, I don't use stop loss. You have to come in every single day. You have to have your checks there. You have to do the same thing. And I think that sometimes that people don't realize that. Perhaps people are hoping that it will get easier. It doesn't. You still have to turn up. I mean, it gets easier in the sense that you understand the routine. You still have to show up and do your due diligence every single day.
It's about forming a habit, isn't it? Like, say, I guess with anything, if you're going to be successful at it, I mean, I think, athletes, or you listen to executives, they have a really strict regime of habits that they go through every day to make sure that they're in the right place and before they start their work.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say to everyone, I have my a pre-session checklist. This is also a day one, and I tend to send to people. And it's just your due diligence before each trade and going through and making sure you've checked everything. And I usually say turn up about half an hour before the session opens. And that gives you enough time to just, be there, settle into it, be able to look over anything. I like to do a top-down analysis. So I like to look, even though I trade on the 1 minute chart, I like to look at the 1 day before I come in. So I'm doing my top-down analysis. I'm looking at like daily momentum, daily price action, economic data, how the previous session looked, how the previous session moved, because that can often give you clues as to how the next session is going to open, how the market reacted to any pre-session news. Did it react positively? Did it react negatively? Did it just mess around? Is there anything coming up? So what do we have to look forward to in this session? Is there something coming up? New York, there's news coming out all day long. So sometimes you have it coming out at 1:30, which is great because we've got a whole hour before the open. This is UK times, by the way. But then sometimes there's news that comes out at 2:45, sometimes at 3, sometimes at both of those. And you have to, be very aware, take each day on its individuality and decide how you're going to plan your trading around that. Because the right thing to do, if there's a news release coming out at 2:45, is not to take a trade at 2:44 just because your setup showed up on technical analysis. It's often better to just wait a minute. So yeah, there is a lot of discipline. That's usually what I like the checklist, because it sort of helps people. It's quite easy to, when it's written out in front of you, to make sure that you're going through and just checking off everything and doing your due diligence. But yeah, coming to the session half an hour before and starting the work is quite an important part of it.
Very good. And just on that note again, what are the common mistakes that you find beginner or new traders making? And how do you help them? Like, what is your advice or your coaching towards helping them avoid those pitfalls?
Being a new trader is an interesting point, because it's very different. The mistakes that new traders make are often very different to the mistakes that more experienced traders make, and some of it is, I guess, inevitable. It's what you go through as you're discovering how difficult it is. I think perhaps thinking it's easier than it is one of the top mistakes. A lot of beginners actually have beginner's luck. That seems to be a common thing in trading, that they will do particularly well at the beginning. I don't know why, but it's really unfortunate because it lets them believe that it's a lot easier than it is. And then they get too confident, the ego kicks in. So yeah, that can be quite difficult. I think, unfortunately, there's almost like this phase that you have to go through when you just find out the hard way that it's actually really difficult. You can be on a winning streak and then you can lose it all. I mean, when I first started, I had the beginner's luck thing. I mean, obviously I was doing some things right, but I was, completely uneducated in a lot of other areas. I would be profitable for 3 months in a row, and then I would lose my money, and then a news event would come along and it would take all of those profits.
Yeah.
So yes, it was a really difficult thing, because I was like, I must be a good trader, surely, because I couldn't have been profitable for 3 months if I wasn't. But also, I can't be that good because I'm not making any money in the end.
Yeah.
So you have to take it as a whole. You almost have to look at the whole year rather than each month, because if you make profits for 3 months and then lose it all in the 4th month, you still haven't made anything.
That's true.
Yeah. So I think that's very difficult for new traders. There's almost no escaping that process and that heartache that you go through when you realize you're not as good as you thought you were.
It's a bit of an existential thing almost, isn't it? Having to leave that ego at the door and making that realization. And then I guess a lot of traders drop out at that point. I imagine there's a big drop off there. And so really making that step and going, actually, okay, fair enough, I'm not as good as I thought it was, but let me do something about this.
That's why I quite like it when people come to me at that point, when they've had that big crush and they're like, but I love it. I just want to be a good trader. I don't care about the money. I really like working with people when they're at that stage, because I don't have to explain to them that it's difficult, because they know it's difficult, and often they're willing to do the work and they're willing to put in the hours. I always set people homework, but they're adults. I can't make them do it. So a lot of it is how much time they put in between sessions. I think the trading simulators are brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant for getting people from one stage to the next, because you can practice your strategy 100 times in a day, whereas in real time you only get one opportunity sometimes. But just getting that practice over and over and over and over, and just going over the market is excellent. But I can't make people do it if they don't want to. Mm. So when people come to me and they're really like, I really want to learn this, I really want to do this, I really want to be good, then I think, okay, well, I can tell you what to do. It's going to take some time though.
Would you say that's what really separates consistently profitable traders from those who struggle, is taking that time to practice during the day?
Yeah, there's no substitute for practice. There's no substitute for putting in the time. And yeah, absolutely, that is a huge, huge, huge thing. Putting in the hours, you don't become, you have to do something over and over to be considered an expert in it. And a lot of traders do want to be naturally good at it, of course. There's no way to be naturally good at it, really. Really. You can possess some of the skills naturally, or you can have certain advantages, but you have to learn the thing. You have to put in the time. You have to get used to the different ways that it moves, the nuances of your strategy. So yeah, I would absolutely say practicing, putting in the time, going on the simulator and just going over your strategy over and over and over. There's no substitute for it. And it's fun. When you get to that, when you're at that point where you feel desperate, it's actually fun to do that.
I think also with the simulator, or the demo account or whatever, when you go back and say back test something, where you test it over so many months or years.
Yeah.
I find it helps me to deal with the losing streaks. Say, okay, this is the strategy. This is how I played it out. It lost this many times, but it won this many times. And if my risk reward ratio was this is how profitable the strategy would have been over this period. How do you help traders build that mindset? Is backtesting or that type of sort of method of coaching something you employ to help them deal, or how do you help them deal with the losing streaks?
You really hit the nail on the head there. That absolutely, it's so essential to backtest your strategy and to have that data, because that will help your mindset and that will help you deal with the losing streaks as well. When okay, I know sometimes my strategy won't work 5 trades in a row, but then I know if I keep going, it will start to play out. You can also look at other things, and there's a really unfortunate thing with trading in that the market conditions do sometimes change permanently. And you're constantly just having to be aware of that as a trader, and always having to just reevaluate is it my strategy, or is it the market conditions, or is it me? Is it the mindset? So that is a question to look at on the losing streak. Is it a losing streak because you overtraded, you didn't follow your rules, or are the market conditions changing?
Yeah, and is there something you're just not seeing? That's what I find so difficult about it. Is it like it's hard to see what you're not seeing?
Yeah,
that's something you've also know. I mean, obviously, you as a do you know what I mean? It's like, what am I missing? But you just can't get to that point sometimes. So I think that's what must be very valuable for traders, is having you as a coach that points that out.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely, look over all of the different things that are likely to be affecting it. One thing that's really interesting to just be aware of with trading as well is that sometimes there are trades going on for reasons that have nothing to do with traders trying to make money out the markets. There's a nice example which I like to use for Forex trading, which is if you think that a big company like Coca-Cola, for example, needs to pay employees all around the world. So they need to pay them on a certain date. They need to exchange money into loads of different currencies. They have to do it. They're not doing it because they're trying to, manipulate the market or anything, but it may move the market in a certain way. They're not choosing to do that for trading reasons. They just have to do it. So the market sometimes moves randomly because people are having to move money for reasons that have got nothing to do with anything that we're looking at. And so I'm just appreciating the randomness of the market sometimes, and the fact that it doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to go up or down or sideways. It doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to give us opportunities for months on end. If it moves how it moves for external factors, and sometimes we never get to understand what they are. Sometimes we can see huge moves happening and we'll never know why. So it's just, a matter of looking through all the things, all the obvious things. I'm really into earnings reports at the moment.
Good.
I really it's a different it's like the fundamentals. It's not like the news releases, but obviously it's the earnings of the individual companies that make up the indices, and it's and I really enjoy watching those and how the market reacts differently.
That's like getting quite into the nitty-gritty of your strategy then, just because you generally trade the indices, the Dow Jones and the Nasdaq.
Yeah, I do.
So you're boring deeper.
I do try, and I try and get the traders that I coach. If they're also trading the Dow Jones, I always get them to memorize the 30 companies, and then we do. And some of them are so into it, and others just tell me that I'm a complete dork.
That's not a very nice thing to say to your teacher.
But it's funny. I will randomly just say, okay, list out the 30 companies, and let's see if we can get more than last time. And the reason for it is you got to be trading this thing. You want to be an expert in this thing. You got to know what makes it up, and you want to be able to see if one of those companies pops up in the news. Like recently, we had Boeing had loads of their staff on strike. Well, you want to know straight away that's a US 30 company that might affect the markets. If you don't know that, that's one of the things that you don't necessarily know to look out for, and you might get confused as to why there's everything else is all technical indicators are saying buy, but something's happening and actually the market's moving down. So you just want to give yourself as good a chance as possible, and really, really knowing and loving the markets and what makes it up and what moves it is a part of that, I think.
And how do you? I mean, it's interesting you just talked about it. I mean, there where you're saying memorize all 30 companies, but I mean, how do you guide traders who feel a bit overwhelmed by the amount of information? You're just saying that you're really into earnings reports now, but I mean, you've been doing this for years, and it's become a gradual thing, and now you're.
That's not day one.
No, it's not day one. And so I can imagine when it clicks, especially for beginner traders, actually what they're dealing with here. I imagine a lot of them feel really overwhelmed. I mean, how do you deal with that moment?
Yeah, I mean that is very common for beginner traders, and even advanced traders sometimes feel overwhelmed because I spring earnings reports on like after we've done a lot of the other stuff, and so there's a never ending stream of things that traders can learn to master the market that they're trading. I try and do it in a logical order. So obviously, if they're a complete beginner, we're just looking at we're looking at price action, how the market moves. When they feel confident in that, once they understand what they're looking for, then we'll move on to, okay, these are the news reports. This is how we look for it, time of day, all of that. And then I'll do it gradually. But it's funny. It is funny, the earnings. People think they've learned everything. And then I'm like, and now we're going to learn the 32 companies.
Great. But you're absolutely right.
This never ends. Sorry, what was that you said?
No, I said that it's fantastic. To be honest, 30 isn't that many. They should be able to pick it up.
No, I have the NASDAQ ones. I've got them all here. I'll show you because this is the pages of the NASDAQ all on. So I'm not going to memorize those.
No, but 30 is manageable.
Yeah, 30 is very manageable. Yeah, 100's a little bit more more challenging. And to be fair, you can find them on the internet, or you can print them out like I do. So it's not, you don't have to have them memorized. But sometimes it's obviously you want to know the top players. Yeah. And also which ones are in both, because that's another question I get asked a lot by traders is why is the NASDAQ moving and the US 30 isn't? And sometimes they move the same and sometimes they move differently. And sometimes it's just something very simple, like, earnings were good for a company that was in both of them, and then another day just for one that's in one and not the other, or, those sorts of things. So.
And I guess just as we come to a close here, I just want to ask, like, how do you measure your success in coaching? Of course, if your traders are profitable, probably, that's one aspect. But from your point of view, what do you define as success?
Well, it's successful if they've made improvements. So they don't have to be profitable straight away, and that's not the only measure. But as long as they're improving, that's success. Trading is, you're forever going to keep yourself amused trying to get better at it because it will go on forever. So, I always say 1% better. We're just going to get 1% better. I do a rotation. I'll see if I've got one of my little rotation things. So I have a little rotation. This one's had a cup of coffee on it, so you can see nice coffee on it. This one's been really loved. But yeah, it's where do I make the most pips? Where do I lose the most pips? And where do I miss the most opportunities? And I always get the traders I coach, we go over their profit and loss together. Often what they think they're losing money on is actually completely different to the facts. So I always ask, where do you think you're losing the most money? Where do you think you're making the most money? And then we look at the facts together, and it's often actually quite a challenging process for them, because actually going over, looking at your losses is a really uncomfortable thing. It requires quite a lot of energy to do that. But often it will be something different to what they think. Sometimes the losses are just too big, and something like reducing your stop loss, your standard stop loss by 10 points can make a difference. That's an improvement. If you're just doing small things, sometimes can help to reduce losses. And obviously if you're a losing trader, the first step is just to reduce those losses, make the losses smaller, make the wins bigger, see where you're missing out on opportunities. So yeah, it's not all about just getting people profitable. Obviously that's the end goal, but for a lot of people, they just want to improve. They want to just get consistently better. So we just work on one thing at a time. And there's another thing with practicing is that we can only really cope with so much at once. So it's usually good to just pick one thing and practice, work on that until you see an improvement, and then maintain that whilst you move on to the next thing. So we're never trying to do everything at once. it's just going through a little, that's why I call it the rotation, improvement rotation, because we're just going through, we'll pick one thing, we'll focus on that, and then move on. So yeah, I would define success as improving. It doesn't necessarily need to be profits straight away, but as long as we're improving and working towards it.
And do you find, I mean, it's interesting you touched on it there, that often traders are just, their losses are just too large. Do you find that with experienced traders, is that often a thing that's holding them back? Is that their losses are still too large, even though they could have a decent win rate, but that those losses are just eating into their profits?
I think sometimes I think I've noticed something with experienced traders, that sometimes it's chasing the wins, or actually even when you are focusing on something that you want to improve on, it almost sets you back a little bit. As an example, I'll use myself as an example. I hate increasing my lot size. Every time I increase my lot size, it sets me back, because I suddenly go, oh, that was too big a loss, or I forget to think of it proportionately to the pip size. So I hate increasing my lot size, because I know that it's always going to set me back a little bit before I get used to it, and it's going to mess with my emotions. And often that can be a thing with experienced traders when they're doing something in order to improve, in order to get better. They're trying to push themselves in a certain way, maybe get a higher percentage than they did last month, or, anything like that, increasing their lot size. Often that just sets them back a little bit. You can end up going into a bit of a losing streak. Obviously, you're doing it to improve and because you're pushing yourself, but it's similar to the gym. If you go up a weight size, it's going to hurt before you get stronger, and you'll have to do less reps before you can, before it becomes natural. So yeah, it's a tough balance. It's definitely a tough balance when you're an experienced trader, because you do have to push yourself. Well, maybe you don't have to, but if you want to improve, you push yourself a little bit, but you also understand that sometimes it does set you back a little bit. So that's often a problem that more experienced traders do face. And I will put my hands up and say I put off increasing my lot size because I just hate it.
Yeah. It's being outside of your comfort zone. It's the same goal walks, isn't it? It's not. Yeah, if you're not comfortable with it, you try and avoid it.
Yeah. I'll be on the same lot size for years, and then I'll be like, oh, I really should push myself.
I think that's great, Caroline. It gives our listeners and viewers sort of, it shows them what realistic trading expectations are. And if someone like you battles to increase your lot size, that's something that's got to take into account as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that when you have the strategy, that's it. That's all you need. But actually, my strategy is the same when I increase my lot size. It's just my mind that gets in the way. Yeah, it's not just the strategy. It's the psychology is always there as well, and it's the practice and getting used to it, and all of that comes into it as well.
Yeah, I think that's very good. That's very good.
Right. Well, I think we're going to leave that there today, Caroline. But it's been fascinating listening to you talk about how the coaching process works, and I hope for our listeners too, they'll get an idea of how coaching can actually make a difference to their trading. I think, as we said at the beginning of this, I think a lot of traders, thrive on ego, and maybe this is giving a few of our listeners maybe a moment of pause to understand that sometimes it's important to leave your ego at the door and come and look for help, and that help will vastly improve your trading. Yeah, so it's been really fascinating, and so thank you so much for coming on again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun to talk to you both.
Yeah, and we'd love to chat to you again, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions in the chat, so we'll direct them your way and answer them.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. We'll leave that there, and Alison, I'll speak to you next week.
Speak to you next week. Thanks, Chris. Cheers, Caroline. Bye.
Bye.